Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome back to the weekend review section of Celtic Down Under. We've had a few weeks off summer sabbatical where there's not been much football happening. We've had the Celtic Down Under somewhat streamlined. We should be joined by Anthony tonight, but he's having some technical issues at the moment, so he might join us later. Even though we're not live, we waited a little bit, but there's no actual sign of any resolution, so hopefully we'll get it resolved and join in at some point. Other than that, I'm joined by Paul and Tommy, myself, Sean, hosting, back in the hot seat. Paul, how's your summer been so far? I've seen you on some of the other guesting on the other Celtic Down Under shows.
Yep. Yeah, it's been good. I had a couple of slots. I think one or two. Yeah, a couple of slots. Anyway, I did the pot noodle, and then did the Tim Talk as well with Jared, which was good fun. And then I was sick for nearly 2 weeks, which wasn't great. And then I'm just back from a week's leave. We had honeymoon in Singapore, which was a brilliant week. So first day back at work. So obviously feeling fully excited by being back at work. But a good weekend. Bumped into Tommy at a gig. The Inspiral Carpets were playing locally, which was really good. But yeah, raring to go. Looking forward to the season kicking off properly on the weekend.
Tommy, how's your? I keep saying summer. It's the northern hemisphere summer. It's a minging winter down here for us. It's been raining pretty heavily. How have you been going?
Yeah, been cold and wet for a large part of it, mate. Out playing football in the wet, struggling with some injuries personally, trying to still play over 45s football. Quite enjoyed the break from all the Celtic stuff as well, to be honest. I mean, as much as I love Celtic, as Paul knows, and probably said on here before, I get a bit stressed and a bit anxious about how things are going and week to week and that sort of thing. So I've enjoyed the break, but really quite excited about this. About the new season and how the team's looking, and looking forward to seeing the impact that Brendan Rodgers can make an already very good team.
Yep, and as you said, we've had not too much to see so far. We had that one, 2 games in Portugal against I can't say the name, Portimonense. The one where there was like no match reports whatsoever. Then the second one, I think was it 4-1 we won, something like that. Kind of started to get more of the international players back at that point. Tour of Japan, which was mixed. We had that 6-4 defeat, against Gamba Osaka, and the 1-0 victory. No, 6-4 defeat to Yokohama Marinos and 1-0 victory over Gamba Osaka. Before we get into the Wolves game, which was obviously rescheduled from our proposed Korean trip, which would have been great for announcing those 2 Korean players the same week, but as it was, the competition organisers were apparently financially negligent, so we had to move it to Dublin, where we managed to get 30,000 fans at the last minute, which was good, but probably could have been better. What did we take from Japan, first of all, before we get into the Wolves game? Anything, as you mentioned, Tommy, Brendan Rodgers, first look at it. What did you get out of the Japan trip?
I didn't see the second game, so I only saw about 70 minutes of the first game. And it looked like our first pre-season game. We looked pretty rusty. Some of the goals we conceded were quite poor. Hart giving away one. Then I think Taylor was caught at the back post. And then the goals later on weren't really good. But having said that, in patches, some of the football going forward, we looked really good on the break in particular, I think. I think that's something that's going to amp up even more this year. Just that effectiveness on the break. We look really, really dangerous. But aside from that, as I said, didn't see the Gamba game, so I can't really comment on that. Nice to get a win, see Burnaby get a goal. But yeah, just nice to see the team back on the pitch in that lovely new kit.
Yeah, which is really grown on us, I think.
Yeah, I think it is, yeah.
Maybe not so much the long sleeve, but certainly the home one. Paul, are you happy with the strip? Have you picked up any significant changes from the Japan games so far?
So the kit's ordered. It's on its way. And I've paired that order with the 89-91 yellow and green away kit as well. So that was one of my favourites as a kid. probably the second away kit I had as a kid. So I'm rolling back the years and ordered that. So hopefully it fits. I've not ordered the same size as I had when I was a kid, thankfully. I thought the Japan trip was a good exercise. Look, obviously conditions were decent. Opportunity just to obviously get some kit. Look, to me, a lot of times before we've sort of branched out and played these further afield games, we've gone to Europe and we've played lower level teams. Like traditionally, that's what we did. We went and played lower level teams so we could give them a spanking and probably like learn nothing. Whereas we've come to Japan, we're playing. Okay, Osaka aren't having a great season, but they're traditionally a big and strong club, and we're playing two teams right bang in the middle of their season. You could see the difference, particularly in the Yokohama Marinos match. You could see the difference in fitness. They were up and running. I think I said on the group chat that we have across the Celtic Down Under podcast group that they're probably as good a side as we will play domestically. And the difference really is that they were fully match sharp and we weren't. So, but as Tommy said, in the first half, we lost 6 goals, and some of them, there's good football involved, but all of them there's some sloppiness. Some is really sloppy. Some of it is just a bit of I thought they were a bit disjointed at the back, which is understandable given all the changes in that back line. There's that happens. So even the goals that were well worked by Yokohama, I thought they could have been defended better with the usual unit, and obviously it wasn't. But going forward, they've come out of the traps flying. Barely a break in things from last season. Hatate's pass to Abada to the square for Maeda to finish is just, that piece of football is just sublime. And I'm so like, I've talked about this a lot, and I think a few of us haven't been very excited to see if Abada would get more game time and would hang around. And it looks like the noises are coming out that that's going to be the case. He's got an opportunity to stick a skill. He started every sort of key pre-season game. And he's looked sharp, and to be honest, the front six have looked great, and there's probably because there's a fair amount of stability there. Meira looked brilliant through the middle, and obviously got 3 goals in that first match. And then look, we've got it's the gold cliche, and I heard the other guys joking about it, but this time of year it's all minutes in the legs, isn't it? So we've got a big squad. There's a load of new guys just been filtered in, and some of across the 3 matches they've had some game time. So decent exercise, I think worth doing. And yeah, like the real stuff obviously starts next week, but we sort of turned it up a notch, I guess, in terms of competitiveness yesterday on Saturday.
Yeah, I wonder. We spent a lot of time saying that is 2 strikers enough, and then my consistent position has been, yes, it's fine because we've got Maeda as the third choice, and he kind of stuck his claim in with that first half hat trick is not just a third choice, but what he does for Japan, which is I guess he's ahead of Kyogo in the pecking order for Japan, so he kind of always the one who should be worried based on that performance. Tommy, was there shades of Jamie Vardy for you and how Maeda was deployed up front against Marinos?
Well, you could say that, but that certainly wasn't what sprung to mind for me. For me, I was just surprised at how lively he actually looked through the middle, because he's played through the middle for us a few times under Ange, and I didn't think he's looked quite as effective. He always looks more effective on the left, but in that game, he just looked particularly dangerous. He was always getting on the end of everything, and he actually took his goals really well, because that's one thing that I would put Kyogo off a bit ahead of him on, is just his coolness and his calmness in front of goal normally, and ability to finish like the goal he scored yesterday. So, but it was certainly good. It gives us another option. It's good to have that flexibility. He never stops running. The pressure he gives us up there, so you don't really lose that aspect if Kyogo's not there. So it's good to have that option. And yeah, look, I agree with you with Maeda and Kyogo, and then do we really need another striker? Probably not. I think there's other areas of the park that we probably want to strengthen before the striker position.
Well, we are going to have a bit of the second half. We can't talk about a pre-season friendly for a whole podcast, so we are going to have a little look at some potential transfer targets later, and we can kind of assess that at that point. But I think other than that, it's probably a good segue to kind of go on to what is the penultimate preseason friendly, which was in Dublin at Aviva Stadium. We had 30,000 fans. I don't think too many of them were Wolves fans, but I'm sure there was a few in there. And we did have, after we mentioned Maeda being deployed through the middle, he was back out in the wing with Kyogo restored to the middle, and the other opposite wing was or the player who's probably, as you mentioned earlier, guys, the one that's we're expecting to maybe stick around and have a big role was Abada. We then had McGregor, O'Reilly, and Hatate as our midfield. Not overly surprising and not too many changes, but I guess where we looked a bit short was the back five. And again, that was kind of mentioned in our group chat. So we had Joe Hart, we had Iwata at right back, Welsh and Scales at centre back, and Taylor at left back. Paul, what did you make of the back five, first of all?
Yeah, well, the team sheet
before and during the game and after.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's kind of how I was going to answer it. But yeah, before the match, you go, one, you've got a slight concern because no Starfelt, which later came out that, you know, there was a bit of an ankle injury and you expect him to play a bit of time tomorrow night in the James Forrest testimonial.
Apparently, Navrowski has the identical injury somehow as well.
Is it Navrocki or Navrowski? I think
anyway, I think
Navrocki. Okay, so yeah, and obviously, yeah, he's got a slight knock as well, which I think we apparently knew who he was signing. So, obviously disappointing that neither of those two, you know, were available. But and on the face of it, you think, well, Wolves are a decent attacking unit. You'd think, you know, there could be some struggle there, but I actually thought Scales and Welsh acquitted themselves pretty well, considering. That, you know, there was no major clangers, and they sort of, you know, bar a very late penalty, that they were pretty close to being part of a defense that held a clean sheet. The Tomoki Iwata, I thought, actually filled in pretty well at right back, given he was up against Neto most of the time, and he was a massive handful, probably their best player. My concern was actually Greg Taylor. I thought he, you know, we've all given heaped praise on him of how he was deployed and how he rose to that, I guess, change in tactic under Ange in terms of inverting. But I think, you know, put him up against a high-class winger, skillful, quick, and ask him to be a traditional fullback against that. He looked in trouble. He did look in trouble. And I think that's where the concern is. When we talk about progression and we talk about, you know, stepping up in Europe, that there's a genuine concern around him against that Champions League class of winger. And we saw it. He got absolutely roasted by, I think it was Nunes, and he got, you know, he all he could do was grab him by the shirt, and he got a booking in a friendly because of that. And really, with him being sort of asked to play in that more traditional sort of wider fullback position, you could see his limitations again, which is a bit of a shame. I kind of hoped that Rodgers would at least persist with him. You know, I'm not necessarily expecting both sides to invert all the time, but he showed himself to add so much value in that position. His awareness is great. He can pick a pass. He works between space well, but he hasn't. You know, we've seen pockets of that, but it doesn't look like that's how he's going to be deployed for the most part. And I felt like he was struggling. Yes, it's still pre-season, but based on that and how he looks to be being deployed, I can absolutely understand why there's calls in the support for, you know, when we've talked about reinforcements at left back for a while, because despite his goal against the Saka, we probably don't think Bernabei's a left back per se. He might end up being a converted winger or something, but it's clearly a bit of a player there. But he's probably not an out and out left back, and so Taylor needs sort of challenge there anyway. But if he's going to be deployed like that, I think there's limitations. So I can absolutely understand. And Joe Hart's a whole separate thing, which I don't want to hog too much time on. We'll cover that, I guess, in more detail in a second. But I was an advocate for him actually sticking around this season and trying to find somebody maybe in the January window to challenge and maybe take over before the end of the season, but certainly be ready for next season. But I've got more reservations after the first few games of the season. Now, it could just be rustiness, or it could be him coming to a natural kind of decline. But I don't want to write him off too soon. But I certainly think we should be, on the basis that Siegrist never looks like he's going to step up and wants to probably move to Australia to be with his missus. Bain is nowhere near it. We definitely need another keeper. Whether that's a pressure on Hart or out-and-out replacement, we need another goalkeeper.
Yeah, I mean, I think when Rodgers was appointed, a lot of the reflection at the time was that Greg Taylor was one who was at risk because he did suit the Ange system so well, which is a somewhat unique system for fullbacks, and it was to do with the fact that Greg Taylor was a centre mid before he was moved to left back, so he kind of fit that. But again, when you think back to Tierney and the likes under Rodgers' previous regimes, there's a lot more for fullbacks bombing down the outside and getting in around, which is more of a kind of Guardiola style system. Tommy, who would you? I know there's a lot of injuries. The 2 right backs are injured, and Johnson and Ralston. We've got the 3 centre backs injured, at least temporarily, in Carter Vickers, Starfelt, and Navroki. What would you expect the line? And left back is, despite having both the left backs available, what would you be kind of expecting the back 4 to be against Ross County next weekend? Because I would assume the Bilbao game is really going to factor in injuries strongly, but what would you expect for Saturday against Ross County?
Well, just obviously it's based on who's going to be fit and available. I don't even know what's up with Ralston, to be honest. I know obviously Johnson had a recurrence of his ankle while he was on duty with Canada, so I know he's out for a bit. The injuries are a real concern. It's probably the one thing that's sort of making me a little bit nervous about the start of the season, more than normal. It's just the amount of injuries we are having up. It's like you don't want to sort of get into that habit of getting into a run of them. It can happen to any team in any sport in the world. You get a run of injuries and it just seems to keep going. So hopefully we can get the guys back sooner than later. But in terms of the back 4 on Saturday, you've got to start Taylor at left back. It's clearly the best option we've got. But I totally agree with Paul and what he said. And it was really noticeable yesterday that the fullbacks weren't really inverting much at all. And it's not really Taylor's game. He's never been that strong guy getting forward, up and down the line. You put a ball in behind Taylor, you get him turned, he's in trouble a lot of the time. He can run all day, but he doesn't have a lot of pace. But he's got to start. I'm assuming that Starfelt will be available, so he's one of the first names you'd have on the team sheet. Right back, you got to stick with Iwata. I think he's been playing there all pre-season. There's no really other options. So then it's just really who do you play at centre half? And then for me, I mean, I thought both the centre halves were actually really good on Saturday. I thought they coped with Wolves' high press pretty well, and they played the ball around well. They looked calm in possession. So I thought they both done really well. So it'd be a toss-up between Welsh and Scales for me. And I'd maybe lean towards Scales, just on the fact that he's left-sided, and then he could play Starfelt on his better side as well. But you could really toss a coin, and then that really depends as well on what the Polish guy is like, what's his fitness like, is he ready to go, is he fit? So, but that's probably the way I would go. It'd be a toss of the coin between Scales and Welsh.
You've got to assume that Kobayashi's injured, given that 3 centre backs
for a few weeks. Yeah,
he got injured. He got injured in that first game against Marinos.
Oh, that's right.
I came off, and I think he's out for a little while. Just if I can jump in just on that, look, I think I said this in the group chat. If we have to go into Ross County with Scales and Welsh, like if there's any doubt that there's a bit of injury hanging around from Starfelt, I wouldn't be risking him against Ross County at home. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it'll be difficult for us and stuff, but the boost of Flag Day and all the rest of it, if they can cope against a Wolves team, admittedly a week or so behind us in fitness, then they should have enough to cope with Ross County. So if we have to go in with it, it's far from ideal. But if your three better centre backs are all injured to some degree, then options 4 and 5 or 5 and 6 need to fill in.
Well, even option 5 is injured, right? So 1, 2, 3, and 5 are all injured.
Yeah. That's what I mean. So, or 1, 2, 3, and 4,
4th and 6th.
So it might be 5th, or it might be 5th and 6th choice. You know what I mean? So it's up there anyway. So, look, realistically, Scales is probably going to move on if we get everybody back to fitness relatively quickly. By all accounts, Aberdeen are keen to get him back on a permanent deal. You'd think that would happen if we can be confident we've got enough cover in there. it might end up pushing towards the end of the window. And I think Dave Cormack's come out and said as much, that they expect to do more deals, but it'll be closer to the end of the window. So I would imagine Scales is probably one of those. I think he played okay, but let's be honest, he's not an upgrade on what's already there. And if we're adding more in the mix, we want them to be an upgrade on what we've already got, not a downgrade.
I seen Ross County scored 13 goals across 4 games in their League Cup, but they didn't have any top flight opposition in there. It was Morton, Kelty Hearts, Stranraer, Edinburgh City. So Morton, who went through and managed to get a draw, a visit to Ibrox, as balls in the freezer kind of thing. Whereas we're away to Kilmarnock, one of only 2 all SPFL, all Premiership games. What's the other one? Motherwell against
St
Mirren. I think that's the other one. So we're up against it to start with. Sorry, I don't want to move on from the Wolves game. That just seemed relevant to what we're talking about. So we then had the midfield 3: McGregor, O'Reilly, Hatate. Were we noticing much different about the way that they were playing? We then also had Kwon and Holm come on later, a couple of new boys. To me, they've shown a bit of dig, the new boys, which across the board, Kwon and Holm in particular, and across these pre-season friendlies. And I wonder if, McPherson, is that just because of our injuries? Probably. I think the chat is he's on his way to Belgium with Oluwayemi and the other one, who's the 2 that have gone to Belgium on Austria, on loan. Who am I talking about here?
Good question. I know the goalkeeper's one.
He's
I can't remember the other one. Joey Dawson, the young striker.
Is it?
I'm pretty sure it was the young striker, Joey Dawson. Played against St Johnstone Forest a year and a half ago, I think, when Kyogo was injured.
But yeah, apparently McPherson's heading over there once our injury crisis kind of eases up a bit. And as you mentioned, Scales is probably hanging around for the same reason. But yeah, how did the midfield go in this game in general? Is this what we expect to see going to start the games against Ross County, Hatate, O'Reilly and McGregor? Tommy, what do you reckon?
I think it's pretty clear that's what will most likely happen. It's probably the strongest midfield 3 over the last 18 months since we got O'Reilly and Hatate in. So I think you definitely go with them. I did like the look of the big central midfielder, Kwon, when he came on yesterday. Look, there's a few tackles flying in. He wasn't afraid to give it out. Look good on the ball, good touch. So he looked good. It let McGregor get a little bit further forward. One thing I did notice yesterday in the first half was McGregor seemed to be trying to get forward a little bit more. He tried to be making some deeper runs and getting forward and actually getting beyond to Tati and O'Reilly, and he just getting into the box. So I think maybe that's something else that we'll maybe see from Calmac this year. Because if you remember when Rodgers was here the first time, he was being played as a right winger by Ronnie Dyler, and then Rodgers brought him in and then started molding him into the player that he's become. So wouldn't surprise me to see a bit more interchangeability with the midfield 3. But I think you've definitely got to start with Hatate and O'Reilly. And I think Hatate, along with Abada, is primed to have a huge season for us, to be honest. I think they're just going to go to the next level.
So, Paul, you can address it in general, but I'm going to ask a leading question first. Do you think that, Kwon, is that, I'm sorry, I'm struggling with these names. So I'm rusty. Is Kwon the prince that was promised last year when we signed Abelgard? Do you think Kwon is that one that's brought in to kind of add a bit of physicality, height, steel to the team?
Well, he certainly, on the space of, I don't know what we saw, 20, 30 minutes of him, it's a bit hard to say for sure and definitively that's, he's going to fit that mold, but he's certainly in the same sort of physical stature. I think he's 6'3". Tommy's point, it looks like he's got a little bit of dig and he's willing to mix it, which is great. You sometimes get these guys that are 6'3" and, blow over on a strong breeze. So it does look like he's got something about him. Neat and tidy on the little bit of play that we saw. We obviously, Iwata sort of suffered from being, being able to cover multiple positions, because really we've not seen him get a sustained run in where we think his best position is potentially defensive midfield, or at least more of an 8. So we thought maybe he was the guy who was going to come in and potentially sit alongside Cal as potentially a bit of a double pivot. Now we've got Quan, and by all accounts, Home can flip between that deeper line and that attacking role as well. And it's certainly good to have options. And in the chat we talk about in a bit about potential other targets. I've got some sort of comments that link back to this, but we're starting to add in cover in that area. So to me, we've talked a lot about needing a champion. If we want to progress in Europe, a Champions League quality number 6. Now it doesn't look like a Champions League ready number 6 beyond Cal. It doesn't look like that's what we're going to do. Like, it looks like we're going to have Cal and another, and probably they'll be, like, to your point, Sean, they'll be a bit more dynamic in that midfield 3, with for the minute O'Reilly holding that sort of number 10 as opposed to 2 8s, and being the furthest forward of that midfield trio. But we know that they can all interchange in terms of, obviously, O'Reilly covered Cal for that period when he was injured, so it makes sense that if they are going to have more fluidity in that midfield 3 and O'Reilly's in there, he can rotate through that. If one of them goes, they just got to be a bit, I guess that would be a more, like I said, that'd be a more fluid system in midfield. And if they're going to do that, as any of us have played the game, your communication needs to be so good, because you can't all be going in one direction at the same time. So I don't know, back to the original point, I think once one to watch, he's one of them that he could just fly forward, or he might just need a season of sort of bedding in. But it's good we're getting these players. He's highly rated, and we've had success from that region before, so fingers crossed with it. It's good to add a decent amount of height, because we're a pretty short squad overall, really, if you think about it. Even the centre backs aren't that tall.
So anyone that's on the video version may have noticed a mirage of Anthony appearing and disappearing there. He may yet join us, we're not sure. I was about to ask his opinion on whether Quan and Home were actually ahead of Turnbull in the pecking order, or whether it was just a case of getting a look at the new faces in a pre-season game. And to be honest, I think it probably was that. And I'm going to stick a pin in the Turnbull conversation, because that's going to be very relevant later when we do discuss homegrown transfer targets. So we can just stick a pin in that one for now. Just to wrap up the Wolves game, though, we will have a little talk about the front line. So we had Kyogo, Abada, Maeda. Now, Abada is really obviously the big focal point for what's been happening this offseason, in terms of we were expecting him to go, and he's still here, and he's looking like he's interested and wanting to be here, and he looks like he might even raise a level, which, again, to give credit to pat ourselves on the back and some other Celtic podcasts, not just ourselves, Abada was one that was pinpointed as potentially getting a Rodgers renaissance, to get a really forced and horrible portmanteau into there. So in the other two, Kyogo and Maeda signed contract extensions, and they both look like they're going to just pick up where they left off, if not even raising at a level. So Tommy, any comments on the front 3? Maybe even on what you saw from Yang when he came off the bench, or Haksabanovic overall, who's maybe been disappointing too? Any thoughts?
Yeah, look, I mean, we've touched on Abada obviously a little bit already tonight, but Abada, as I said, he looks really sharp. He looks as if he's going to take the next step, I reckon, this year. You've got to remember, he's only 21, something like that. He's still really, really young, so he's still got a lot of development in him, and he couldn't be working under a better manager to bring him on and add more to his game. So really excited to see him. Kyogo and Maeda have just done yesterday exactly what they do every week, just the pressing. Particularly I found in the first probably 20-25 minutes when we were really on top, their pressing, Wolves couldn't handle the pressing up top, and it created a lot of turnovers, and it's where we got the goal. So, I mean, as long as they stay fit as well, I mean, I can see Kyogo scoring probably 40 goals this year if he stays fit for the full season. And Maeda, as we spoke, he brings a lot to the team, and now he's maybe got that versatility, giving us another option through the middle. So, really exciting. Yang, I'm not sure. I didn't see enough of him yesterday. There was one point where I think not long after he came on where he got the ball, took it inside, and wasn't afraid to have a ping with his left, which is good. Showing a bit of confidence. But similar with Quan, the central midfielder, it's hard to sort of get a gauge on what these guys are really going to be like and what they can bring to the team over the long term. But You'd like to think that they'll provide some competition, at least for the guys that are in possession. Haksabanovic, just not sure where he's going to fit in. He just doesn't seem to have the same pace. He reminds me a bit of Scott Sinclair in that he's tricky on the ball, he's better on the left, and he likes to get in and have cut in from the left and then try and have that shot. I'm just not sure if he's going to be, and I could be eating my words here in a few months' time, but I'm just not sure if he's going to fit into the way we are playing. Just not sure if he's dynamic as the other guys we've got up there, and I think that really brings a big power difference to our team the way we are up top.
Paul, anything you want to add on that, particularly on Haksabanovic, who's been the big talking point, I guess, over the 3 games?
It's a bit of an enigma, isn't he? Like, he's clearly a talented player, but it's like, to Tommy's point, is, you know, where does he fit? You know, I don't really think he's a winger, if I'm honest. Is he a 10? Has he got the work rate to be a 10 in a high pressing system? Is he definitely offers? So when he came on in the, I think was it League Cup final, he came on the League Cup final, and we were under the cosh a little bit, so we were playing on the counter. He looked great in pockets, but then just his final ball or his final wasn't quite there. And look, that's probably because he wasn't completely match sharp. But weirdly, I think he might offer something in the Champions League, which, you know, because there's that space to run into. But ahead, you know, equally Mayer is obviously lightning, so he's got that advantage as well. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what Rodgers does with him if he can get more of a tune out of him. He's certainly talented. He's got good feet. He scored some nice goals. But yeah, he hasn't. It's what this happened a couple of times last season. He got opportunities after cameos where he came on and scored, or, you know, played well, and then he got a start and he never really grabbed that opportunity. He hasn't really done that, and it seems to be in the case in pre-season as well. So I don't know what's going to happen.
You're disparaging the 2022 November Player of the Month there. Calm yourself.
I think
I'd love to see him push on, but it's like we are heavily loaded with pseudo wingers and, you know, now midfielders. So
yeah, you're not wrong.
It'd be interesting to see how and we still want more, right? We're still talking about a proper out and out left winger to replace Jota at that kind of similar level or higher. And we're also talking about a Champions League quality number 10 to be a level up from O'Reilly, or at least try and push O'Reilly to compete at that level. So if we do get either of both of those in the remaining 4 or 5 weeks before the window closes, I do wonder about the future for Haksabanovic, but it'd be interesting to see what Rodgers can do with him.
Mm-hmm. So obviously, as the game overall went, we just kind of summarize it up quickly. We kind of dominated the first half, and you kind of touched on earlier that might have been down to the relative stages of pre-season that we're at compared to Wolves. We made a lot of changes kind of within after an hour, and Wolves kind of got into the game at that point. And, you know, Kyogo scores the goal, Hatate and Kyogo both hit the bar, all within the first 12 minutes. So we really were out the traps, dominating them at that point. And then the big talking point, you mentioned Joe Hart and looking shaky throughout the game. And again, that's been a consistent thread through all the preseason games. But the big talking point, obviously the contentious point, and related to one other Scottish team's preseason form as well, is was Paul, we'll start with you. Was that a penalty?
So we had a quick chat before we came on air, Sean, and basically Celtic TV were quick to call it a Todd Cantwell, weren't they? So let's address that. And he's I can't remember it was Doherty, wasn't it? So Doherty. He's looking for it, right? So he's definitely looking for it. And I guess by the letter of the law, there is simulation there because he's anticipating the contact and he's already on his way down. I've looked at and we've had a chat. You know, we also had a couple of us had a chat about this before we came on air. We've seen the replay from multiple angles, and it's still not clear if there's any contact or not. What you can say is Hart isn't pleased at all, so he thinks that 100% he's dived, and he's definitely gone looking for it. In Doherty's defence, if there is a defence for him, Hart doesn't pull his arm out. right? He doesn't change the direction of his arm once he's coming towards him. So I think there's probably minimal contact, but potentially contact. And rightly or wrongly, and I think wrongly by the letter of law, but if there's any contact, pretty much referees give it. So whether the player's looking for the contact or the contact is what is initiated, 95% of the time they get given. So yeah, it was soft. He's not going anywhere. So if you're going to be hypercritical of Hart, he doesn't really have to rush him where he is. He's quite wide in the box between the 6-yard and the 18-yard line and in the channel. You know, he doesn't need to come out to that degree. He could just narrow his angle and hold his ground. There's a couple other quirky things he did where that other one from a super tight angle, it somehow got under him and hit the post and popped out. In his defense, he had a really good save late on just before the penalty. And he was brave to somebody's feet at the end of the first half. So he wasn't without some redeeming features. But yeah, he gave the ref a decision to make, and more often than not, they give it. So yeah, on the balance, I'd be quite happy if we got it, and I wouldn't be surprised to have it given against us. So,
Tommy, do you think Hart should be doing better in that case, and also do you think if VAR should be overturning it? What did you reckon?
Well, I haven't seen it. I only saw it quickly before we come on, as I mentioned. So I haven't seen it as much as Paul. At my first glance, it's really soft. But Hart, to Paul's point, he doesn't really need to charge out there and give the referee a decision to make. It's quite wide in the box. He's not really going anywhere. You know, if he just sort of holds his ground, then he doesn't give the guy the opportunity to dive. There's no chance for the penalty. So I think just overall, Hart has just looked a little bit shaky in pre-season. Don't know whether it's rust or whatever, but even just there was one point he passed the ball straight to a Wolves player and kicked the ball out of play. So realistically, he's been great for us since we got him. He's exactly what we needed at the time. But I think for us, if we want to push on and take the next step in Europe, that's definitely one position that we should be looking at, because Siegrist doesn't give me any more confidence. In fact, less than Hart does, and we don't need to talk about what Bain does as well. So definitely an area that I'm sure that it's been looked at.
Yeah, and my opinion on the penalty is that look, if I'm refereeing a game and I see that, I'm not giving a penalty just because the way the player's gone down. So as you say, as a simulation, and like when I'm refereeing, I don't have VAR. Like I'm just doing amateur. So if I see someone throwing their arms in there like that, I'm like, right, okay, regardless of the level of contact, he's playing for that. And since I can't see clearly, I'm just going to go with what's obvious, which is this guy's chucked his arms in there. But in a world of VAR, I think whatever the referee gives in that situation, you can't be overturning it. Like as you mentioned, Paul, there's no clear contact, there's no clear gap, there's nothing is clear about it in any direction. So I think just whatever happens is whatever happens. In terms of the Todd Cantwell one, that one is much clearer. He's already halfway to the ground before the goalkeeper gets near him. So that one is a clear simulation. The way it generally works is you don't have to give things chronologically. Like if they're close enough, it's, you award them as being, you consider them to be happening at the same time, and you give the one that's more serious offence. But generally, it's chronologically you give things happening with. So if it's if he's started the simulation, then there's been contact by the goalkeeper. Technically, it's the simulation that should be punished if there's enough of a gap there. So yeah, like I can see that happening at Ibrox in 4 weeks' time, right? That's why we're talking about it at all, right? Because we know this is going to happen. There's another team in Glasgow that have scored 5 goals in pre-season, and 4 of them have been penalties or something like that. I'm not sure if that's the actual number, but it's something along those lines, right? So we can see this coming down the road. We've already got referees on the back pages, and it's only League Cup pre-season time, right? Did you see the Kevin Clancy thing?
No, I haven't seen that.
It was who's the Motherwell manager now? Stuart Kettlewell.
Kettlewell, yeah.
Yeah, he was going nuts because so Motherwell needed some goal difference in Celtic Hearts to drop points or whatever for seeding for the cup. And so they're they'd won the game. It was 3 or 4-0, but they needed more goals for seeding. And Kevin Clancy played 5 seconds of injury time when there'd been 10 subs and a head knock, and he played 5 seconds of injury time. And Stuart, it was the back page of the paper. Stuart Kettle was going nuts.
He was fuming.
So yeah, so we know like these things, even though it's a preseason friendly, what does it matter, right? Like it's relevant, right? It's all, and it's going to like you can put a pin in like a bookmark in this, and we'll come back to it in 4 weeks' time, and we'll say we had this conversation. You know. Any more comments on the Wolves game before I move on to our transfer targets section?
One thing I would say is just one thing I noticed yesterday, and I noticed it a little bit in the Yokohama game, is we seem to be going a little bit more direct, a little bit more often, instead of, I mean, we did a little bit last year as well under Angelotti to see where we were always trying to work the ball up to the edge of the box, but it seems to be more of an emphasis in times to, you know, getting that ball forward quickly and getting in behind. So I'm really looking forward to see how that develops through the season.
I felt that was a second half tactic from Ange. Like, as in the players would go in at half time and Ange would be like, just get it for, you know, it felt like they came out and did it at the start of second halves in response to whatever blast they got. But yeah, I agree. Yeah. Paul?
Just the interplay between sort of leave Cal out of it to some degree, but the front 5 or 6 is just was really good, especially in that first half. Like we hit the woodwork twice, but in terms of other opportunities carved out, even beyond hitting the woodwork, we could have been 3 or 4 in the first half, and then we discussed the penalty because it's relevant to the heart discussion. But in terms of a future game, it's not an issue. The couple of bits I like Hatati's from off the crossbar post from the angle was brilliant. Same with Kyogo. The couple I really liked was Matt O'Reilly got, like, right before halftime. Matt O'Reilly got in, I think, on a quick free kick, and again, like, nipped in, and might be McGregor that played it in behind. O'Reilly's off and running like he has been a few times last season, and he doesn't look up for once. He just pings it, and to be fair to him, he pings it where Abada usually is, which is lurking at that back, like coming in off his wing and lurking at the back post. But in this case, Abada's actually peeled off for a cutback, which, to be fair, O'Reilly quite often likes to look for a cutback rather than a fizzer. So just a disconnect in pre-season, I guess, because those two haven't played as often in the second half of last season as maybe they would have done in the season before. So that was a good bit of play. And the other one I was going to note was on the other side, Abada did really well, got in behind, did a decent cross in the middle, and Kyogo's movement, just the dummy to let it flow through to Maeda, and he should do better with the finish. Like, he'll be disappointed with the finish, but just that interplay between those guys already this early in the season, to Tommy's point, with the Tati in behind as well, we could be looking absolutely on fire in the front section, which, to be fair, early in the season we might have to be, because we're probably going to leak a few goals from the back if we don't get the back line sorted out. But I'm pretty optimistic that the front 4 or 5, 6 are already up and running and looking good for the start of the season. So it's quite exciting. And we think we'll probably, not to mention the additions that we've already made, that are probably going to build themselves into a season, but we think that there might be 1 or 2 first team ready people. Well, I certainly do. I certainly think there might be 1 or 2 first team ready signings still to come before the window closes out.
Well, that's the Fabrizio Romano chat, is that Celtic are expecting, they weren't expecting to lose Jota, and they are expecting to go out and find a replacement. So
I was reading that just before we came on air as well. I noticed that the first time I think it was about last night or something. It was, or early this morning it was posted, but I just got to there. Yeah.
So that kind of leads into the second part of our show, which is, I guess, the kind of final third at the moment. So the state, I guess it's not so much a scattergun, right? Because obviously a lot of the chat is like, at the moment, is what range of value should we be looking at to sign players? Because look, the vast majority of players we're going to sign nowadays is names we just don't know, right? Nawrocki, who had heard of Nawrocki before we signed them, right? I'd say maybe 1%, if that, of Celtic fans, right? It's mostly going to be, and he's probably the closest to first team ready out of the 5 we've signed. Now, I know a lot of us down here had heard of Telio, and then maybe Liam had heard of the Japanese boys, but really, again, we're the 1%ers, right? And that kind of, when we're talking about these names. So when you look at our squad, right, we've got, on our website, we've got 32 first team players listed. Of those, 5 rather, are club developed, and that's Ralston, Welsh, McGregor, Forrest, and Mikey Johnston. So in terms of Champions League profile, that's we need to have 4 of those to have a full squad. And then we can also have 4 country developed players. And again, we have 4 of those at the moment, and that's Bain, Taylor, Turnbull, and James McCarthy. So you would assume players like James McCarthy and Forrest are getting on the fringes of that, or Mikey Johnson. Like you'd guess the 4 club developed ones is going to be McGregor, Ralston, Welsh, and then Forrest, maybe Mikey Johnson. Not really sure about that.
With Mikey's injury, it's probably going to be Forrest in it. Mikey's out for about 3 months, I think, so it'll take us probably past the start of the Champions League.
Yeah, we could also look at it as just can James McCarthy and like Mikey Johnson can be one of the Scotland. Like we can get 8 without having James McCarthy kind of thing. So it's probably going to be that, right? So that kind of 9, 32 minus 9, 23. So that means we're allowed 17 non-homegrown players, and we've got 23 listed on the website. So this is an issue, right? That means 6 players are going to be not on there. So if we want to be developing our squad as a squad for Europe, then we should be targeting players that are going to qualify for that kind of homegrown player criteria. Now, what happened this week was a rumour emerged that Celtic are in talks. Celtic and Leeds are competing for Ryan Fraser from Newcastle. Now, Ryan Fraser is someone who qualifies for that criteria due to the fact he was at Aberdeen till the age of 19. So I've spent some time going through a list of players that I think are potentials, and I've broken it down into 3 parts, right? In terms of realism. So I'll go through the first batch of names. You guys we can just chat about, what names jump out at you. So the first batch anyway are the ones that I've gone by transfer market value to split it into 3. So the top 9 names are all players that are 10 million euros and above on transfer market. So I'll just run down them. So we've got Andy Robertson, John McGinn, Kieran Tierney, Aaron Hickey, Christoph Ayer, Harry Suter, Nathan Patterson, Scott McKenna, and Josh Doig. Now, they all have various pieces of information attached in caveats. Andy Robertson's the oldest at 29, John McGinn's 28. In terms of contracts, Scott McKenna's out of contract next year, whereas the rest of them are all 25 or beyond, 2025 or beyond. But their transfer values are between 48 and 10 million. So is there any names in that list? Robertson, McGinn, Tierney, Hickey, Ayer, Suter, Patterson, Scott McKenna, or Josh Doig that you think are realistic targets? Paul?
No.
No.
Unless there's some legs, unless there's some legs in the Tierney stuff and it refuses to go away, but I still think it's difficult that can happen unless there's some sort of loan. But as I said before, I think I said this in the pot noodle, I'm not really interested in a loan for Tierney if there's no option to buy, and I don't see how we could afford the option to buy other than the fact we've got a sell-on clause, which we could argue we could knock that back off because we'd be the buyer. But I still don't see how the maths works on that.
But we need homegrown players, and he's Champions League quality.
So he is, right? And so he is Champions League quality. But I think we are going to spend more than... So I think the maximum we will spend on a 1, maybe 2. If it's 2, 15 on both, or a balance thereof, total fee of 30. If it's 1, maybe 20, maybe. But as soon as you're up at that kind of level, wages start to get a bit ridiculous, right? So we don't know where Cal's just gone, 50-ish, maybe 55. I don't know. 60 seems a bit beyond it, but maybe. So that's probably as much as we would then pay whoever is, these marquee signings, if we were going to call them that. So I just think that's a stretch. And being honest, and without stealing the thunder, you look at the list, I'm not sure how many of them you go with. Because as much as we want to progress in the Champions League and homegrown is an issue, you still got 17. You got 17 other nationalities, and Carl is a definite starter. So there's a squad of 18. Chuck in a couple of goalkeepers as backup, whatever level they are, you're at 20. Couple of kids, unless you have a real run of terrible injuries like we've got now. If most people are fit, the squad has enough depth. I don't know. My view is, of those, who would you spend the money on? Harry Suter's obviously. Harry Suter is the only one to me, potentially, other than Tierney, where but the problem is, it depends what his value is. How much did Leicester pay for him? 20? 15?
Yeah.
So he got relegated, right? So that's the only reason I think he could be tempted. At 24, he fits the profile for me. But is he much better or better than Starfelt and Carter Vickers if they're both fit? Because if you're spending that amount of money, it's got to be not just to tick the homegrown box. It's got to be better than what we've got, or at least better than what we've got. Like, certainly if you're spending
I disagree fundamentally. Sorry, Paul, just to interrupt
on
you
the
at that
top
point.
Like,
think of Man City spending like £50 million in Fabian Delph. That's because they needed homegrown players, right? Why are we exempt from that logic?
Well, they've got a lot more money than we have, and I don't think
the point stands, right?
I don't think we should be paying. Certainly not from this chunk. The problem is that this top chunk is hefty. That's any of those we're going to break our transfer record. If they're not absolutely first team better than what we've got, I think it's a waste of money, to be honest.
I don't disagree with your point about the money, and then I'm making the point that it would be inflated for that reason. Like, these are not ones we'd be considering if they were a no-name player at Getafe, right? Some Spanish kid. We would not be considering the players of this level of talent, apart from maybe like one or two of them, but like not for this money, right? Tommy, any in there for you?
Look, for me, I reckon Tierney would be the only potential one, and I'm not on the same side as Paul. I would take Tierney on loan for a season if we could come to do it. I think it's unlikely, but for me, Tierney solves an instant problem that we talked about 20 minutes, half an hour ago, in terms of the Champions League. Greg Taylor's a really good player, but for that next level, against Champions League quality wingers, who do you want there? Would you rather have Kieran Tierney, or would you rather have Greg Taylor? So, and the fact that he's, obviously a diehard Celtic fan, whether we could pick up the wages or not, I'm not sure, but he would be the only one out of that list. I haven't seen enough of Harry Suter to make a judgment on whether it'd be worth spending that money. But in terms of buying any of them, it's just out of our market, unfortunately. The loan for Tierney would be the only one I could see potentially.
I guess I know we're speaking about this in terms of, the homegrown. So that we're making it a sort of binary, Taylor or Tierney. I'd say it doesn't have to be, right? To fit this argument, it does. But I'd much rather we went and spent another 2.5 to 3 to 4 million and got an equivalent Alistair Johnson on the left back position in the market.
I wouldn't disagree with that.
In the markets we've been doing well at, and look, this is where I'm saying, right? To me, is 17 overseas players with a few homegrowns, including Carl, who's a first team starter, is that enough, right? For what basically is 6 games, unless we get unless we get third. Because being honest, unless we get an absolute killer draw, it's unlikely we're going to get second without a fair amount of luck. So, and to me, that's what being defeatist. That's where we want to achieve. I think it's quite unlikely in this first season under Rodgers. If we could get third, it would be a right result, and then we're into the Europa League. Yes, I'm basically,
Look, I think,
put my cost to math. I don't think homegrown players is a solution for the smallish part Europe plays in our overall season. Not this season anyway. And we've got a bigger issue nationally in that as we move down this list, we've got a shortage.
Yeah, but in terms of, we've got 23 players that are overseas, right? We've got 17 spots. Sorrow, Ayeti, and Scales are all included in that list, right? So
so they're
straight
gone.
away, so right, but then there's still 3 you need to lose after that. So you're after that you're looking at Kobayashi maybe, or
Yeah, I think he's gone, and then
it's Tillio's next, maybe?
Tillio or well,
Yang,
Yang maybe one of them, probably.
maybe Kwon or Holm. That's the next one's up, right?
Yeah, potentially, or Haksabanovic, as we've spoken about. You know what I mean? So there's, but bear in mind, we're also talking about this hypothetically, and we could still have someone else come in. So if, for example, Tierney did come in, then Burnaby disappears, doesn't he? So I suppose that's a like for like on that list. But as I'm saying, like 17 with some backup from local players, is that big enough squad for Champions League?
If you're those players, right? No. If you're those players, the ones that are not making Champions League squads, and why would you're going on loan, right? At that point, if we sign Tierney on loan, Burnaby's canned, right? He's going on loan to somewhere for the season.
Yeah,
that's kind of the way it has to be managed. But yeah, anyway, sorry, just tune into time here. So that's obviously the top tranche, and you're right. Apart from Tierney on loan, it's pretty unrealistic to be expecting any of those names to come in. I'd love to have Nathan Patterson. I don't care that he used to play for Sevco, but I don't think it's realistic. Scott McKenna, if he was half that price, he's listed as 10 million. If he was half that price, I'd take him. He's a left centre back. I'd love to have him in again.
Yeah, I agree with you. I wouldn't. You might pay 5 or 6 for him. I'm not paying 10 million for him. Not a chance.
Yeah, nah. And they've stayed in. Nottingham Forest survived relegation, so I don't see him coming.
Yeah.
Now, this middle list, this is your more realistic targets. Okay, so I'll just run through these names. Ryan Christie, Lewis Ferguson, Billy Gilmore, Ryan Fraser, who we've mentioned, Ryan Gold, Stuart Armstrong, Alvin Ramsey, Jack Hendry. Oh, that one's probably not realistic because he's just moved, but you get the point. Ross Stewart at Sunderland, Angus Gunn at Norwich, and Ryan Porteous. What names there, Tommy?
Probably a couple. Billy Gilmore potentially on loan. I haven't seen a whole heap of him, but I've liked what I've seen of him in a few times he played for Scotland. I think he played really well at Wembley in the Euros a couple of years ago, but plus it would probably wind up the other side of the city as well, so it'd be quite humorous. But he would be one again, but need to be on loan. I couldn't see his. I mean, it's on here at 9. I reckon he'd probably be more than 9. I don't know. Could be wrong. Maybe Stuart Armstrong. Stuart Armstrong thrived. He was another one that really kicked on when Brendan Rodgers came in previously. He was a really good sort of box-to-box midfielder and makes those runs in behind that we were talking about earlier. Those would probably be the two that sort of I would look at. I know that you mentioned Ryan Fraser, and there's been some talk about that. I haven't seen that. I haven't seen enough of him to know what he would bring to the table. So, but yeah, probably those two, Armstrong and Billy Gilmore for me.
For me, it's Angus Gunn. I've liked what I've seen a lot of him playing for Scotland.
Does he qualify as home trained?
I wasn't sure if he was homegrown.
He doesn't.
I don't think he does because he's come through Norwich's ranks, has he not?
Sorry, I just went to the Scotland national team and chucked him on. You're right, Angus Gunn does not qualify. My bad.
I think we had a dialogue with this across a while back. So yeah,
we did. You're right.
He's been floated around by a few places for this reason, but he doesn't qualify. So
you're right. Yeah, same with Scott McTominay. Yeah, those ones don't qualify even though they're Scottish. My bad. Apologies for that. But yeah, so definitely not Angus Gunn then. Ryan Fraser's an interesting one because he's 29. So maybe 1 or 2 more seasons at top level. So probably one that's on loan. And he's still got 2 years left in his contract in Newcastle. Billy Gilmore, you mentioned again. So even though I said I would take Tierney on loan, that's more because it seems like it might be a problem position. Whereas to me, centre mid is not so much a problem position. So unless we lose Hatate or Riley, I'd be only wanting Billy Gilmore in a permanent.
Same.
Christie or Armstrong, I would take one of in terms of us because they're good enough and are homegrown. It's not what I'd be hoping for in terms of developing the future, but for this season, they would be a positive addition, I think, to.
It's neither. Look, Armstrong more appealing than Christie for me. But it's both a bit of, to me, it's a bit of a backward step. There's no resale value. So are we loaning them?
You're right.
Yeah, are we loaning them? Are we buying them? Are we spending that kind of money on them? They're kicking around here at, I don't know, Christie at what? I mean, 9. Good luck. Armstrong at 6. Now Armstrong's only got a year left on his contract, but apparently he's committed to. But apparently Armstrong's committed to sticking with Southampton, even in the Championship. So I would say both those guys' wages would be a problem. That we, albeit there's money in the bank, as I said earlier, I think that money can be invested better elsewhere, and we take our chances with a slightly less deep squad for Champions League or for Europe. I feel like there's an element of taking people just for the sake of it. And I get the homegrown, it's one in, one out. But if it's for somebody that's already or recently been added to the squad, if it's like a second choice winger, pushes one of the young guys we've just bought out of the squad for Europe, doesn't say a lot for how we think about them. So I'll get pelters for this, but the two in that section that I like are Ferguson and Gilmour. But to the point, they're both fair amount of money, and they're an area where we're pretty well covered for. So unless people are leaving, Gilmour I think is definitely good enough. Question marks about Ferguson. We've heard good things about him. I think he's at Bologna.
Who's he been linked with? Is it Juventus?
I don't know.
Is that a Juventus or Milan? It's one of those.
Yeah. So he's clearly doing okay. Again, both of those guys, 22 and 24. So again, they fit the profile. 2 or 3 good seasons, selling for a bigger profit, even if you outlay money. But it's an area we're pretty well covered. So you're kind of, to me, this is a kind of 2 birds with 1 stone type of exercise. And I'm not sure that the level of outlay is worth the extra bang for buck in terms of they tick a box for the homegrown element. But let's crack on with the next part of the list.
Yeah, in terms, I don't really. I mean, I do sometimes, but in terms of Christie and Armstrong, I don't apply it's a step backwards thing. I just look at it as, I know what you're saying about the age profile as well. I would just think of it as a kind of short term, as in, again, we would not be signing these players unless we had an issue with Henry. That's an issue, but it's an issue that's been long term, and we're now having to deal with in the short term, right? So we're now paying the price for this, right? And that Turnbull is hanging around because we need to. He probably gets a 3-year contract because we need to hit the quota. Just before we move on to the next one, just specifically on Calvin Ramsey, that could be a 1 in 1 out for upgrade on Anthony Ralston if Calvin Ramsey has progressed since he was at Aberdeen. Now, what I've seen of him when he was at Aberdeen, he's not better than Ralston was at the time, and it might be that he's gone down to Liverpool and been found out, kind of like Danny Ralston did. But if he's improved at Liverpool, I'd be thinking of him as a right back. In terms of,
I guess it just depends what kind of. I think it depends what kind of money he's listed here as 5. Has he played any games for Liverpool? At any kind of level, do you spend 5 million on a 20-year-old because he's been sold by Aberdeen to Liverpool? I don't know, but I agree that he's. To me, I'm looking at the ones with the right age profile in an area of the pitch that we need further resource, and he ticks a box on there. Same as Patterson, but I think Patterson's a bit more money.
So the bottom of this list here is kind of your dregs, and I don't expect you to jump in too many of these names. So I'll run through them relatively quickly, and you can see if there's a case to be made for any of them really. So all under 2 million and under in terms of value. We've got Martin Boyle, Jackson Irvin, who I believe is a free agent, Kevin Nisbet, Lawton Shankland, Scotland's backup strikers. Then we've got the backup goalkeepers for Scotland, Xander Clark and Liam Kelly. Just gone to Sturm Graz, Max Johnston, so that's probably less relevant now. Danny Armstrong at Kilmarnock and Lennon Miller at Motherwell, 16-year-old. He doesn't technically qualify yet, but I guess that's the argument, right? do we start looking at future squads now? Any of those that you would potentially have in, or is it all just there?
No. When you're getting to that level, going back to Paul's earlier point about the squad size, I think the squad size of 17 or 18 for Champions League is a bit skinny to rely on. So we definitely need some more quality. But if you're getting to the bottom of that list, then I'd rather be seeing some of the young guys that we've actually seen in pre-season and sort of have been on the fringes in the last 12, 18 months. Ben Summers, McPherson. I quite like the look of, I think, Daniel Kelly when he came on against Yokohama and he played in the midfield. I quite like the look of him. So, no, if you get down to that point, then no, I would rather that we keep the money in the bank and give the young kids an opportunity, to be honest, than spend the money in an area of the pitch where we need it that isn't necessarily Scottish.
Paul, any there that you could make a case for?
Well, rumour has it there was interest in Max Johnston, but obviously he was, and he would have been a good signing. I think he's an upgrade on Ralston, and he would have pushed Alistair Johnston. And let's be honest, look, Alistair Johnston's probably not going to hang around if he keeps the trajectory up that he's come in his first sort of 6 months, he won't be there for that much longer, maybe a season or two more, and then he's gone. Like, he's already 24, I think. So, if he's going to get a move to the Premier League, he's going to want to get that at 25, 26, you'd think. So a year or two. So we kind of, and that's why I like the fact, a lot of people moan that we're projects, but guys like Kwon, Tilio, Home, Yang, now not all of them are potentially going to come good, but to me, they're if you get it right, they're the next wave that replace, Hatate, O'Reilly, Abada. Jota's already gone. Maeda signed a long-term deal, so hopefully he's around and he's a bit older. Same with Kyogo. But that's the squad sort of development, so that you've already got the replacement. When you sell somebody for bigger bucks. Of that list, the only one that interests, obviously Max Johnson's already gone to Sturm Graz, so he's off. But I liked his profile. I like Danny Armstrong as a player for the FL, but I don't think he's going to add anything we haven't got, and we're now got 3 or 4 right wingers. So I like Lennon Miller actually. Now 16-year-old, really raw, but had a lot of game time for Motherwell of a kid of that age. Is he an upgrade on O? No, probably not. But is he, to your point, is he a player? And the problem we're spending this amount of time discussing, is he a player that we could get in and sort of develop? His problem is, and to this issue, if we bought him, if he was even willing to come, you'd probably immediately loan him back to Motherwell or somebody else where he's going to get first team football. And then at some point further down the track, if he makes the grade, he's potentially pushing for a squad place as that second or third striker and eventually add into it. So he's one we should be on the radar, but he'll be on the radar of lots of clubs. And unfortunately he'll, at some point somebody will offer him more bucks than we'll be willing to spend, and he'll probably end up elsewhere. But of that list, he's the only one that we interest. I guess going back to the earlier point, to me, 17 non-Scottish or Scottish trained or Celtic trained or kids. So that's 17. McGregor, Taylor, Turnbull, and probably Ralston currently is 4. So it's your squad up to 21. And then you can have pretty much all the kids you want from the B team. So
yeah,
it's
the only one to me in that last list that makes any sense, it would be Liam Kelly as an upgrade on Scott Bain, and that's it. Right.
We see that's the thing, because at the minute we're talking about to one of those homegrowns, you could have Bain and then a kid, but really you're then banking and that's if Hart still stays. If we get a replacement or a challenger for Hart, then clearly those two are 1 and 2 in whichever order that ends up, and Bain then has to be 3. But the only other risk you would take to free up some space would be to drop Siegrist and put Bain and a Scottish kid, and then you've got 2 of those spots full. But to me, that seems too much of a risk, especially if it's Hart at 36 years old, who, if he gets an injured, then you're absolutely goosed in terms of goalkeeper cover, and I don't think we want to take that risk.
If you squint really hard, Tommy, can you see maybe Nisbet say we're really desperate. We just want, we can't file our 8 players. We've only got 7. If you squint really hard, could you see a spot for Nisbet as the 8th?
No, I haven't seen. To be honest, I haven't. When I've seen him play, he hasn't really done enough for me to say that he would be, even at the Scott McDonald level for us in terms of the league and Europe. But maybe I haven't seen enough of him. But yeah, just none of those names sort of jump off the page at me to make a case for just buying them for the sake of getting a homegrown quota.
I think that's the challenge, right? It's a real the issue you've got here is you're buying them to make a homegrown quota for the Champions League, and you're going, would you want them in the Champions League squad? Would you want them anywhere near it? Can they add any more than a B team player, right? And and I mean not like for like, they're obviously better, but the chances of them actually being used, do you not just risk a kid? Because it's really we're talking about topping up our bench here, aren't we? This is what we're talking about. We're topping up our bench, or is it somebody that can actually challenge and be better than the first team? And I think that list sort of, there's not much on that list that we can either realistically afford that would make the first team better, or then if they are potentially first team ready, it's almost much of a muchness with the guy that, and the only different, it's positive. It's positive action, isn't it, to put a Scottish player in over a Japanese or a Korean or another nationality? And if we're going to do that, especially because you're going to pay a premium on fee, it's got to be a bit of an upgrade, and I'm not sure too many of these are.
Especially when you get to the bottom of the list.
Well, yeah. But I think the point there is that we've got to play a longer game on this, and there's been an endemic failure on that, and some of that's outside of our control, right? Look at somebody like Ben Doak, who scored in the friendly in Singapore last night, I think it was. He's starting to make the grade, and
but he's
gave him game time.
Right? Like, Barry Hepburn's back on loan at Queen's Park, right, from Bayern Munich.
But they're not all going to make it, right? But when the ones that are, and these guys are going to make a career in football, right? They're just not going to make it at the absolute elite level. But when you get somebody like Ben Doak at 16, you've given him his debut, you've wanted to make him a part of the first team squad. He's getting game time, and you've put a pretty good offer as far as Celtic are concerned in front of him. But then Liverpool come along. There's not too much you can do about that. So this is why, and this is a broader point it's worth making. The homegrown rule as a squad number, to me, is an absolute joke. It's yet another UEFA. Well, it's a dud rule that impacts certain countries worse than we're a population of 5 million in Scotland. England's at a population of 60 million, and it's the same rule. It's the same amount of players. How does that make sense? It doesn't. To me, it's an absolute nonsense of a rule. I know why it's there to try and encourage it, but what it leads to is clubs try to game the system. Your point, Fabian Delph for 50 million, nonsense. Us talking about, do we maybe buy Nisbet to sit him on our bench for the champion? The problem is the rule doesn't work, and therefore, teams trying to game the system. And certainly for us, if we look at it, there's a pecking order to youth development. Our best youth are going to get plucked off by leagues and clubs that are richer than us and can stockpile players and loan them back out, and then it doesn't really matter if most of them don't make the grade. So we've then got to go and look at other youth team systems, like we did with Frimpong at City, Cham. We pick up these players who have been on the books, aren't going to make the grade there. We get them, they get a hefty sell on, but then we make a profit on them and play them. And but that's not going to help the homegrown player situation. So there's multiple issues at hand here, and like I said, like my theme is, I don't think unless you're going to fundamentally improve the first team or the first team squad, then it's worth try to jam a square peg in a round hole and pay over the odds for it as well.
Tommy, do you want to say something there?
No, it was just when you sent out the list earlier today, I had a look, and there was something a couple of months ago I read. There was an article in Politico, and they're talking about one of these legal advisors to the Court of Justice in European Union has suggested that there's going to be some challenges coming into that rule, and because it is unfair, to the point that Paul just made, I think it's a Royal Antwerp or something in Belgium had raised it. So hopefully they do review it, because it would say, as you said, we're particularly disadvantaged being in such a smaller nation than others.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully it
Definitely.
does change.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. And the only thing they've done so far is put a limit on how many players teams can send out on loan, which is hardly going to stop them stockpiling youth players. It's just going to mean the youth players are sitting in the reserves instead of going out.
Yeah, they don't get to go anywhere.
It's not going to disincentivize Chelsea or Man City from stockpiling youth players, right? Not at all. They're just going to have to choose which ones. But anyway, we are well over our hour, so we'll probably wrap up there. Any quick final thoughts, Paul, before we go?
A couple of music-related things. So, yeah, I mentioned that we were at the Inspiral Carpets on Saturday. They are playing shows in the East Coast this week. Don't know when this will go out, because obviously it's not live, but if it goes out in the next couple of days, I think they're playing shows Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne across the back half of this week. So if you're a fan of the Inspiral Carpets and you're not aware of it, go see them. And yeah, my music recommendation of the week is Blur's new album, The Ballad of Darren, which came out in the last week or so. Long time since we've had a Blur album. We've had Damon Albarn albums, and we've had Gorillaz albums, but while since we had a Blur album, and yeah, it's up there as you would expect. So yeah, The Ballad of Darren by Blur, out on all good streaming services and vinyl, no doubt, is my recommendation of the week.
Oh, good. And Tommy, any other final thoughts from yourself?
Well, very similar theme to Paul, in that I was going to recommend Blur's single "The Narcissist" off the new album, because I think that's an absolute perler. I've listened to the rest of the album only once. It's not really grabbed me yet, but yeah, that's the Narcissist is definitely worth getting into. And the Snuts, who I've mentioned before on this podcast, they're coming to Australia over on the East Coast in a couple of weeks. I'm heading over there with my daughter, so they'll be in Melbourne on Saturday the 12th, and then I think they head up to Sydney and Brisbane after that. So if you're in those neck of the woods, the Snuts, good Glasgow band, a lot of good tunes, get some tickets for them.
And welcome to Anthony, who's decided to join us for signing off time. Anthony, anything you'd like to add before we wrap up here? Sorry.
It's been a challenge tonight. Finally got everything working, literally at the end of the broadcast. But yeah, I just hope we get off to a flyer this weekend. So I'll be back ready and raring next Monday night, and we'll go then.
Thanks, Anthony. Apologies for everyone that missed out on your dulcet tones tonight. As we mentioned, we've got Ross County at home this Saturday, 7:30 p.m. WA time, which will be 9:30 on the East Coast, I believe, and 12:30 in Scotland. And you can work out your respective time zones from then. I'm sure the Pot Noodle guys will do a proper preview of that after the Bilbao game, which is tomorrow. The only other thing I'll say is a belated happy birthday to my siblings, Owen and Ryan, who had their shared birthday a couple of days ago. They are twins, so happy birthday, Owen and Ryan. And apart from that, can you please like, subscribe, follow us on all of the social medias. I think we also have the new one, which has not been added to our thing yet, the Threads, in addition to Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. So please like this video, please subscribe, and thank you everyone for listening. And we'll be back hopefully live next week to review the Ross County game. Hail, hail.
Hail, hail.
Hail, hail.